My ex-wife took the check out of my hand, looked me in the eye, and tore it in half. $5 million. Gone in about 2 seconds, right there in the parking lot of St. Vincent's Hospital, where my mother was waiting on the 7th floor for a surgery that couldn't happen without it. I stood there holding the 2 pieces like they were still worth something. "Diane," I said. "What did you just do?" I expected her to yell. That was the Diane I knew, quick temper, loud voice, always ready with a reason. But she didn't yell. She didn't even look angry. Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing over my shoulder at the parking lot in trance like she was checking to see if someone had followed her. "You don't understand," she said. "You can't cash that check. Not this one. Not from him. Him." My business partner, Russ Kessler, had written that check 3 days earlier as a loan against the sale of our shop, so I could cover my mother's surgery before her heart gave out completely. Diane had never even met Russ. "How do you know who wrote it?" I asked. She didn't answer. Her phone rang in her coat pocket, and when she pulled it out and saw the name on the screen, all the color left her face. She turned it so I couldn't see the caller ID, and she took 2 steps away from me before she answered. "Don't let him talk to you," she said into the phone, low and fast. "I already handled it." Handled it. Like I was a problem to be solved, not the father of her son, not a man standing in a hospital parking lot with a torn check and a mother who had maybe 6 hours before the surgical window closed. She hung up without saying goodbye and put the phone back in her pocket like it had burned her. "Who was that?" I said. "My boss," she said. And then, quieter, "You need to go back inside. Stay with your mother. I'll fix this. I want you to understand something about me before I go any further. I'm 68 years old. I've run a small engine repair shop for 40 years. I don't scare easy and I don't get fooled easy, not anymore." But standing there, watching my ex-wife's hands shake while she tried to sound calm, I had the strangest feeling I'd had in a long time. That I wasn't angry at her, that I was scared for her, and I had no idea why. If you want to know why she tore that check up, stay with me, because what I found out over the next 3 weeks changed the way I understood everything about the 11 years we were married, and it started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I went back inside because there wasn't anything else to do. My mother, Ruth, was propped up in a hospital bed on the 7th floor, 89 years old, with a heart valve that the doctor said had maybe a week left in it before it stopped being fixable. The surgery was scheduled. The surgeon was ready. The only thing standing between my mother and that operating room was $180,000 in fees the insurance wouldn't touch, and I'd had it. I'd had exactly enough. And now I had 2 pieces of paper. "Where's the check?" my mother asked, because she always knew when something was wrong before I said a word. "There was a mix-up," I told her. "I'm handling it. I've never been a good liar." She looked at me for a long second and then let it go, because that's what my mother does. She lets things go until she can't anymore. I called Russ from the hallway. He didn't pick up. I called Diane. Straight to voicemail. I stood by the vending machines for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do, and that's when I noticed something. A man in a gray suit, maybe 50, was standing by the elevators, not doing anything, not going anywhere, just standing. When I looked at him, he looked away too quickly. I told myself I was being paranoid. Grief does that. Fear does that. Russ finally called me back around 6 that evening. "She what?" he said, when I told him. "Tore it up. In the parking lot. Said I couldn't cash a check from you." There was a long pause on the line. "Frank, I need you to listen to me. When did you tell Diane I was writing that check?" "I didn't," I said. "I never told her anything. We don't talk, Russ, you know that." Another pause, longer this time. "Then how did she know it was 3 days old before either of us signed the sale papers?" I didn't have an answer. Because I hadn't told her the amount. I hadn't told her who it was from. I hadn't told her anything at all. And yet she'd known enough to destroy it in front of me before I'd said a single word. That night I drove to her apartment. She wasn't there. Her neighbor, a woman named Carol who used to bring us tomatoes from her garden back when Diane and I were still married, was out front watering plants in the dark, which told me she'd been waiting for someone. "She's not here, Frank," Carol said. "And I think you should leave her alone for a while. Carol, my mother needs surgery. Diane destroyed the money. Carol's watering can stopped moving." "She what? You didn't know?" "No," Carol said slowly. "I didn't know that part." That word, that part, sat with me the whole drive home. Like there was a part Carol did know. The next morning I went to Diane's office. She worked, I should say, because that changed too, as a compliance officer at a mid-sized regional bank downtown, First Meridian. I'd been there exactly twice in 11 years of marriage. The woman at the front desk told me Diane wasn't in, and when I asked when she'd be back, she got a strange look on her face and said she wasn't sure Diane was coming back at all. "She still works here," I said. "Doesn't she?" "You'd have to speak with Mr. Aldrich about that." "Aldrich." I filed the name away and left. I went home and did the only thing that made sense to a man with no money and a mother running out of time. I called every bank I'd ever had a relationship with and asked about an emergency loan against the shop. Every single one turned me down within an hour, which struck me as strange, because 2 years earlier, when I'd needed a loan for a new lift, it had taken me a single afternoon at a single bank. By the third rejection, a young loan officer, more talkative than the others, let something slip. "Sir, I have to be honest with you, there's a flag on your file. Someone submitted a fraud alert linked to your name 2 days ago." "A fraud alert? From who?" "I can't say. But it came through a bank compliance channel. Whoever filed it works in the industry." I sat in my truck outside that bank for a long time. Someone in banking compliance had flagged my name 2 days before Diane tore up that check. Diane worked in banking compliance. I called her again. This time she picked up. "Diane. Did you file something against me? A fraud flag?" Silence on the line, long enough that I thought she'd hung up. "I didn't do it to hurt you," she finally said. "I did it to protect you. You have to trust me on that, even if you don't understand it yet." "Protect me from what?" "From Russ." That answer should have made sense. It didn't. Russ Kessler had been my partner for 15 years. He'd never once given me a reason to doubt him. "Diane, my mother needs that surgery in 5 days." "I know," she said, and her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since her father died. "I know, Frank. I'm trying to fix it without anyone else getting hurt." "Anyone else?" "Not you." "Anyone else." She hung up before I could ask what that meant. For the next 2 days I did what any reasonable man would do. I went to Russ's house. I laid out everything: the flag, the fraud alert, Diane's strange warning about him, the man in the gray suit at the hospital who I still couldn't shake from my mind. Russ went pale. "Frank, that check I wrote you, it came out of an account tied to the shop sale. First Meridian Bank handled the escrow for that deal." "That's Diane's bank." "That's Diane's bank," Russ repeated. "And 2 weeks ago, before any of this happened, I got a call from a compliance officer there asking unusual questions about the buyer. About where his money was coming from." "What buyer?" "The man buying our building. Warren Sackett." I'd met Sackett twice. Polished, quiet, always paid in full and on time. I'd never questioned him. "Frank," Russ said, "what if the check wasn't the problem? What if the money it was drawn against was the problem, and Diane knew that before either of us did?" I didn't sleep that night. Somewhere between the fraud flag and the gray suit and Sackett's name and my mother's slowing heart, I started to understand that this wasn't about Diane hating me, or Diane being cruel, or Diane wanting to control my life one more time on her way out of it. Something else was happening. Something bigger than a torn check. And Diane, for reasons I still didn't understand, had put herself directly in the middle of it. 2 days before the surgery deadline, a man walked into my mother's hospital room while I was sitting with her. Gray suit. The same man from the elevators. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. "My name is Elliot Aldrich. I'm Diane's supervisor at First Meridian." My mother, half asleep on pain medication, didn't stir. I stood up fast enough to knock my chair back. "You've been following me." "I haven't been following you," Aldrich said, calm as still water. "I've been protecting an active investigation, and unfortunately your family got caught in the middle of it. Can we talk in the hallway?" Out in the corridor, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick, Aldrich told me the first piece of a truth that would take 3 more days to fully surface. 6 weeks ago, my compliance team flagged unusual activity in an escrow account tied to a commercial property sale. Diane was assigned the case. The buyer, a man named Warren Sackett, was using a network of accounts to move money that didn't belong to him. Laundering, Mr. Whitmore. Through legitimate-looking real estate deals. That's the man buying my shop. "I know," Aldrich said. "Diane figured that out 4 days ago. And she also figured out that the check your partner wrote you was going to be drawn from an account that was, at that moment, still under federal review. If you had deposited that check, Mr. Whitmore, your name would have been attached to a laundering investigation. Possibly frozen assets. Possibly worse, depending on what the Bureau decided about your knowledge of it." I felt the floor tilt slightly. "She could have told me that," I said. "Instead of destroying it in a parking lot like a lunatic." Aldrich's face changed then, just slightly. Something almost like sympathy. "She wanted to tell you everything, Mr. Whitmore. I ordered her not to. It's an active federal case. She was already risking her career telling you as much as she did. That phone call in the parking lot, that was me, warning her that if she said one more word to you, we'd have to pull her off the case and possibly consider her compromised. Don't let him talk to you." I'd assumed she was talking about me. She'd been talking to Aldrich about someone else entirely, about not letting Sackett, or someone connected to him, get near me. "So she destroyed it to protect me," I said slowly. "She destroyed it because it was the only way, in that moment, to guarantee you wouldn't deposit it before we could freeze Sackett's network." She didn't have time to explain. "She had about 90 seconds before you'd have walked into that bank." I sat down on a bench in the hallway because my legs didn't feel entirely reliable. "My mother needs that surgery in 2 days," I said. "I don't have another $180,000. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. "Diane already knew that too. That's the part she's been trying to fix without breaking federal protocol. It's why she hasn't slept in 4 days. It's why she stopped being able to look you in the eye." I thought about every conversation Diane and I had had since our divorce 3 years earlier. The clipped phone calls. The way she'd stopped coming to family dinners even when our son asked her to. I had built a version of her in my head, cold, distant, done with me, and it turned out some of that version had been true for an entirely different reason than the one I'd assumed. The next morning, Diane came to the hospital herself. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week, because she hadn't. She sat down across from me in the family waiting room, and for the first time since the parking lot, she didn't look over her shoulder once. "I'm off the case," she said. "As of this morning. I told Aldrich I wasn't going to watch your mother lose her window while I followed protocol to the letter. He can fire me if he wants." "Diane, let me finish." Her hands were still shaking, but her voice wasn't. "Sackett's accounts are frozen. That's good for the investigation and terrible for you, because it means the sale of your building is frozen too, along with any money connected to it, which includes Russ's check. I can't undo that." "Then how?" "I took out a loan against my house this morning. $180,000. It's already wired to the hospital." She looked at her hands. I should have told you the truth the second I understood what was happening. I let you think I was hurting you when I was trying to save you from something you didn't even know existed. I'm sorry, Frank. I really am. I didn't say anything for a long time. 11 years of marriage, 3 years of divorce, and I realized I had spent most of that time believing Diane had become someone I didn't recognize, when really I'd just stopped being close enough to see her clearly. Why didn't you just tell me to hold the check instead of tearing it up? I finally asked. Because you would have argued with me, she said, and for the first time in the whole ordeal, something like her old dry humor came through. You've never once in your life just done what I asked without an explanation. I didn't have an explanation I was allowed to give you. So I made the decision for both of us. My mother's surgery happened the next morning, right on schedule, paid for by a woman who legally owed me nothing anymore and chose to give everything anyway. 6 hours later, a nurse came out and told me it had gone well, better than expected, and that my mother would likely see another 5 or 10 years because of it. Warren Sackett was arrested 2 weeks later, along with 2 men from a shell company I'd never heard of. Russ got his money back through a slow, frustrating legal process that took the better part of 4 months, and the shop sale eventually closed with a different buyer entirely. Diane wasn't fired. Aldrich, it turned out, respected her more for walking off the case than he would have for staying quietly compliant. She got a formal reprimand and, from what I hear, a promotion about a year later, because apparently the people who write the rules also notice when someone breaks them for the right reason. As for me and Diane, I won't stand here and tell you we got back together, because that wouldn't be honest, and honesty is the only thing that ever actually mattered in any of this. But we talk now. Real talking, not the clipped, guarded kind we did for 3 years after the divorce. She comes to family dinners again. My mother, who never liked Diane much during the marriage, now calls her, the one who saved my life, which Diane pretends to be embarrassed by and clearly isn't. That I think about that parking lot a lot. The way I stood there holding 2 torn pieces of paper, certain I understood exactly what kind of person she was. I was wrong about her for 3 years before that day, and I might have stayed wrong for the rest of my life if the truth hadn't forced its way out. That if there's one thing I'd want you to take from all this, it's that the people who hurt us the most in the moment are sometimes the ones protecting us the hardest, in ways we're not able to see until much later. It doesn't excuse everyone. It doesn't explain every torn check or every silence. But every so often, it's worth asking the question before you decide you already know the answer. I know I almost didn't. And I think about how close I came to never finding out. I still think about that parking lot sometimes, not because of the money, not even because of Diane, but because I was wrong about her. And why Mom got her surgery. Diane and I never went back to how things were before, but we finally learned to talk again, and I learned something important. Sometimes, you don't know the full story. So don't judge too fast. That if this touched you, subscribe for more, and remember, the truth comes when you're ready for it.